Good afternoon, fellow Plexers. This video is for Mike, who desperately wants to gain tone mapping under his Windows Plex server install. So Mike has a TerraMaster S4 210 NAS. It's very underpowered. It's not capable of running Plex server. It's only capable of being a file server. Nothing wrong with that. So he bought a B-Link 12th gen mini PC. Looks like a NUC. It's got an i5 12450H processor in it. Nice mobile processor. Really good iGPU. A little bit newer than what I run in my NUC. So if this is an Unraid video, why are we starting with a Synology NAS? Well, because Mike has a TerraMaster NAS, and that's where we're going to start. So generally, Mike, what you have to do is create a shared media folder. Now, I lazily called my shared media folder Plex for my main system. I might recommend somebody calling it media-plex, but I just called it Plex. So Plex Media Server is a test package install of Plex on this NAS. I also have a wrong folder. I also have a couple test Plex containers. Well, only one on this NAS. I have a couple different ones on my older NAS. This container is running right now on this NAS. And then I also have some public domain media that I use with my test servers so I can show YouTube video footage of a movie playing without getting a copyright strike. But again, I lazily named my shared media folder Plex. I like the idea of nested folder structure. So for each type of Plex library, I have a simply named a shared library folder, sort folder, let's say, for each one. Plus this little guy. This is where my incoming stuff comes in. Having it all in one shared media folder allows those super fast atomic moves if someone is interested in a trash guide setup. So inside my movie sort folder, you see my actual movie library folders that a Plex library can point to, or a Plex movie library can point to. So that's why I'm starting with a NAS. All I had to do here is to create a specific user for my NUC. I don't know what I named it. Maybe Unraid. Maybe Unraid lowercase with its own, I don't know, septillion year password to crack. I'm big on using big, strong passwords. So that's it from the Synology side. You have one shared media folder for the best performance. If you have multiple ones, it's just more paths to set up in the Unraid Docker container. Not a huge deal. And you create a user to use an Unraid. And that's where we are now. So I'm going to go through a few of these tabs. The first tab is the dashboard. Over here it shows some containers that are running. This shows the motherboard info. This shows my processor and how much resources are being used at any one time. I've got somebody streaming on my server right now. It's a direct stream. I don't want to give away their username. Well, of course, doesn't matter. Their username's showing up here. This is an add-on, this Plex Streams. And you'll see this is just hanging out. Nothing resourceful is going on with my hardware. If I drop down, this is also something that you can add when you do what you need to do to set up the Intel iGPU. This gets added. And that's probably Mike messaging me now. I told him I was making this video. So if I started a 4K stream off this server and forced it into a transcode, this starts to light up like a Christmas tree with what's going on. What else do we have on this page? I don't have any virtual machines. I don't really have a lot of shares going on because I'm not sharing anything off this unique install of Unraid. I don't want to have any data stored here. It also shows that I'm connected to my UPS. So I have a CyberPower 1500 something UPS that my Synology DS1520 is plugged into with a USB cable. And that's set up to automatically shut down within like 3 or 4 minutes or so of losing power. If I've only lost power for a minute or two, the NAS operates on battery power. But if it doesn't come back on, the power doesn't come back on, it shuts down. So I can't physically connect UPS to two devices, but through the NUT protocol, I can add the IP address of each system to the other so that when the Synology NAS is going to shut down, it sends my Unraid install the same instructions and it shuts down with it. So both these are plugged into the battery side of my UPS and it shuts down automatically when power is off. I wouldn't know how to do this with a plain Jane Linux install. I wouldn't know how to do this with Windows. I wouldn't know how to do this with a Mac, but it works. It was pretty easy to figure out here, and it may be easy on those other systems too. So let's go into the main tab. We'll start here. Unraid boots off a flash drive but runs in memory. Now, I didn't know anything about Unraid when I first started researching this a little over a year ago. I set everything up with a test 8th gen Dell Optiplex micro PC. It only had one SATA connector and one NVMe slot, just like this NUC has. So the issue was finding a good flash drive. In the Unraid forum, multiple people said not to use a SanDisk flash drive. I searched and searched, and somebody said, oh, these drives are verified. It was unofficial advice, and this Samsung Fit drive was one of them. And I just decide always to try to do things in the best way I can, follow as many instructions as you can, if not all. And I ordered this on eBay and waited a week and a half for it to ship in from China. That's how I am. Now, version 7 may change this, but Unraid needs at least one storage drive in order to start the array up. And I learned quickly by reading a little bit that you could substitute a flash drive as your one storage device if you wanted to run a couple SSDs for only a cache pool. So I just threw in one of the most decent older flash drives I had. Again, I stayed away from the SanDisk or the no-name ones I might use, but I had a Lexar 64 gigabyte flash drive and I plugged it in, and I've been using this for a year and not quite a year and a half. A year and a quarter. You'll note nothing's written to this. Most of it's free. It's not being used. It's just a requirement to boot. And if it failed, I'd pop in another flash drive, add it as a storage unit, and I'd be booting Unraid in 2 seconds. This failure doesn't cause me any downtime. It's just a dumb flash drive. This failure will cause me downtime. I should have mentioned that your Unraid license is tied to your flash drive. So start off with a good flash drive and don't start off with a cheap one to test with. And then immediately back that flash drive up through the Unraid software. I think there's a tool you can add, but this is not a tutorial video. It's just a general fit and feel to see if Mike thinks he can use Unraid. So then we come to two drives which aren't really used as normal storage. Unraid allows you to add SSDs as a cache drive because they're fast, and then you can put them into a cache pool. So if you come from the world of a consumer NAS or a computer, we think of cache as temporary storage. It's not temporary storage. A cache pool is permanent storage. If I lose power, I don't lose any information unless something was being written in the moment, and you might lose that bit. So you can start with just one drive, and I've used this term a lot. I found Unraid stupidly easy to get used to compared to getting used to Synology NAS or Synology DSM, and I didn't find Synology DSM that hard to acclimate to. So you can add one drive and create your Plex container or other containers. And if you like this, you get a free 30-day trial of Unraid. If you like it, you purchase it, and you buy yourself another SSD to join to the first. I have a video showing how to replace a cache pool drive. It's in my other playlist for a standalone Unraid setup, and it doesn't take long. You shut the unit down, you pull the old drive out, you put the new one in, you boot back into Unraid, you start your array if it doesn't start automatically, and you click a few buttons. Well, actually, you got to shut the array down, click a few buttons, restart the array, and the new drive is just part of the cache pool. There's nothing to wait for. If I lost a drive on my Synology NAS, where am I? Storage Manager. If I lost one of these drives, I can replace it. It's easy to replace, but it'll take a day and a half, if not longer, once the new drive is in to rebuild the array back to healthy status. This is such a nicer feature for your Docker containers. The minute a drive bads, you can have a drive on the shelf waiting just in case. These 500 gigabyte drives are $40 a piece. You can keep a spare and just pop it in. Buy another spare to throw on the shelf. They're not going to get any cheaper. They're not going to get any more expensive. And you'll see 500 gigabytes is overkill. I'm only using 114 gigabytes with the containers I have running. But at the 250 gigabyte level, you have hardly any choices of quality drives to use. So you might save $5 or $8 by going to the next smallest size, but there are a lot more drives to choose from in the 500 gigabyte size. So some people, if they follow my path, they're like, why don't I want 1 terabyte drives or larger? It's because you're not going to use that space. If 1 terabyte drives were the same price as 500 gigabyte drives and you had more choice of quality drives to buy, then jump to that level. But as long as you have choices to buy at this level, that's all you need. 383 gigabytes free. That's a lot of free space that's not being used. Okay, so now we're going to get to the magic of it all. We talked about adding a specific user to my Synology NAS, which is what I use in Unraid. Well, this is all nothing. This is all stuff you don't have to figure out. It's point and click. You click the Add Remote SMB NFS Share button, and you point to your Synology NAS. You put your username in. You put your password in, and you choose mount. You change a few settings so that you auto mount whenever you restart Unraid. You change a few settings to auto start the array. So normally this is the part of the array that auto starts, but you also want to auto mount this part. None of it's hard to figure out, and my videos show each step. My videos may not be a complete one-on-one walkthrough because I went through afterwards to show you things, but it's not hard to figure out. So now that you have this information, it's not hard to use when you set up your containers. So before I go to the containers, I've got protection, I've got RAID redundancy. This was easy to connect to my UPS that was already connected to my Synology NAS, so it shuts down and starts back up. One of my later videos shows how to delay the start. So if this NUC and my Synology NAS start at the same time, the NAS may not be up and sharing files before everything restarts on this really fast hardware. So someplace I found a setting to delay the array starting because Unraid's going to boot fully first. So I set, like, I don't know, if 2 or 3 minute delay before the array started. Maybe it's a 4-minute delay. And that gives a chance for the NAS to be up sharing folders so that I can then auto mount this. So I can delay the array starting, but I can't delay the auto mount, if that makes sense. So then we get into the Docker containers. I can delay Docker containers. This top speed test is more of a sacrificial container that I can start first and delay by 300 seconds. This doesn't connect to my Synology NAS. Tautuli doesn't connect to my Synology NAS either, so I add a 30-second delay after that starts. I just added gaps. It's a Docker container that can search your Plex movie collections to find missing items from existing collections. With my use of it, I've determined that it finds a lot of made-for-TV movies you might not want in a Plex collection. So then Channels DVR starts. That's 15 seconds later. All told, if I lose power due to a power outage, it takes about 8 minutes for this Unraid NUC to be back in business, and that has guaranteed that my Synology NAS is up and ready to provide files for it. None of this was hard to figure out. It was all pretty easy to figure out. So let's go into the Plex container settings. Okay, so let's turn on Advanced View. Let's turn on Show More Settings. And let's start here. Let me copy this. This extra parameter line enables hardware accelerated transcoding once a few other items are installed, and it sets up my transcoding to RAM. All Intel processors, this is the line you need. To transcode to RAM, this is the line you need. I have 32 gigabytes of memory, so I'm using 16 instead of 32. It uses half my memory. I honestly don't know what the hell this is, but it was part of the information from the fabulous Ibercorp video that I learned some of this stuff from. So what else do we have to show? Well, when I first set this up over a year and a half ago, I basically recreated my path that I had from my Synology Docker container, which I learned that I didn't need. I could have one path. So as you see, this is the same address except for the /TV, /movie, /music, /photo, /video. If I wanted to, I could get rid of everything and change it just to this and rename the path for, I could call it Plex Media, and I wouldn't need 5 path statements. That's how I set up the test Unraid setup on my other playlist, where I show how to create a simple Unraid server with storage on the Unraid server. Just one path. So even this part wasn't hard to figure out. The default Unraid container, when you create it, it has a path for TVs and movies, which I always think these path things are kind of confusing to someone new, because what do you do with your music library if there's only these two? Well, you don't need one for each library. You can just have one to your main shared media folder. And that's about it. The only big change is when you add a new path, when you add a new container, it wants to go to user, which would be the default storage, and I don't have default storage. So where it says user, I change it to cache. I had to do that for every Docker container, and that puts the container on the cache pool. It's all very easy to figure out. And then I thought that was going to be the last thing, but let me show you some installed apps. And my video shows all this. So you have to install this, the GPU stats and the Intel GPU top. There's an NVIDIA GPU top if you were using a NVIDIA GPU instead of the Intel iGPU. I installed this nut tools to connect back to my UPS through the Synology NAS. Plex Streams is an add-on. Unassigned devices is a necessary inclusion to make the connection back to the NAS. So Mike, this is it. This is kind of like a walkthrough. It's all point and click. None of it's easy. There's tons of information in my YouTube playlist. It may not be a direct step-by-step tutorial, but it almost is. And let me bring that in last because I can talk about that a little bit. Okay, my first video is my test. This was on the 8th Gen Dell Optiplex. And
you have an informational
what's
message.
this? This is comparing. Oh, this is after I moved the test Plex server to this NUC, comparing hardware acceleration between my Synology DS1520 Plus and this hardware I'm speaking about right now. So this is when I moved my container. I moved the container from the Synology NAS to the Plex server, or to the Unraid NUC itself. I blew this container away and moved my existing container over, adjusted my paths, made sure everything was scanning properly, and my users never knew what was going on. By this point, I had enough experience where I think I waited for my last user to get off the server at midnight, and by 12:35, I was marveling at my accomplishment. I was like, this was too easy. I had already moved the Synology package. The night before, I had shut it down and made a copy of it so I could start it back up in the morning. And then the next night, because that copy was already established and had been moved to the Unraid NUC, I could just sub it in without having to wait for any copies to be made or transfers to be made. So my users went to bed, and I went to bed shortly after having moved the container from the Synology NAS to the Unraid server. So I get a couple things wrong in this. And I talk about the move here. I think I talk about the move here. I must have got lost. I remembered making a duplicate video and never going back to see which one I wanted to keep, so they're both here. This talks about my channel's DVR container install. And then I realized I made a mistake in this video, and I described how I mounted the NAS wrong. So this is very important to actually do the mounts. I think I may have left a message in the description here, but who reads those, right? So this talked about how I made the connection to the UPS through NUT. And this shows how to update a Docker container on a Synology NAS or this Unraid server. And then I had never said what to do to make the hardware transcoding work. And when I realized that, I had to follow up with a quick video. And that's not hard to show. You're just into the settings, transcoder, and it's simply adding this and hitting save. And you'll see the Tiger Lakes Iris XE, Tiger Lakes Generation Iris XE graphics iGPU. I've got the tone mapping enabled. So, Mike, this really is a great solution, but it's up to you to watch this video to decide if it might be something that you can use and get set up. My tutorial video gives you every bit of information you need. But if you need someone to hold your hand with a step-by-step, do this, do that, or hey, you made a mistake there, back up, I can't be that for you. But I can give you the example of what you need to do yourself, and I can help you out if you get stuck. But if you get stuck because you weren't following my instructions, it's not always easy to figure out what's going on. So it's all visual. If you're a visual learner, these tutorials will help you. If this kind of tech is just confusing, this may not be for you. But the one clue I can give you is if you had an easy time setting up your own NAS and did not find that difficult, you won't find this difficult either. If you had a really difficult time and you struggled with your TerraMaster NAS, most likely you'll struggle with this. So I don't know you. I don't know how this is going to be for you, but doing my best to tell you this is easy to use. It doesn't take a lot of resources to get going. And compared to an NVIDIA card, buying an Unraid license is cheap. You don't need to buy the big one because you're only going to have a couple drives in it. So Mike and everyone else, happy plexing.